Good evening. I hope that you had a relaxing afternoon, and I'm so thankful that you're back with us tonight. Uh, I was listening. It's been a few weeks ago, but I haven't been able to get it off my mind. I was listening to a sermon by the late Wayne Jackson in the truck, and he said something in that lesson that struck me, and it was just one of those moments where you're like, you know what? That's incredible. He said, if you go back and you look at all the things that the demons said about Jesus, they're going to be positive. I was like, what? That's fascinating. He said, go back and look because there's not going to be too many of them. So go back and look at all the times that demons spoke and Jesus' encounters with them, and they're going to have a positive light as they reflect Jesus and his character. So guess what we're doing? We're looking at the times that demons spoke, and as far as I know, and I could be mistaken, it would be the first time, but I could be wrong. There are 2 instances when demons speak to Jesus. And we're going to go in Luke. We're going to look in Luke because one of them is only, unless I'm mistaken, only found in Luke. So begin with me in Luke chapter 4, and this is the first instance when a demon speaks to Jesus. Now allow me to set the scene because we have in this week, in this 7-day period of time, Jesus has officially started his ministry. He goes to Nazareth, if you remember, and he is in the synagogue, and he's there on the Sabbath day, and he opens up and he finds the place in Isaiah chapter 61, and he begins to read, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me." You remember that. "He has sent me. He has anointed me to proclaim good news." And then after he gets done reading this particular passage, he rolls up the scroll and he hands it to the attendant, and everyone is amazed. So amazed, in fact, that they reject him. And they essentially say, "Get out of here." So he moves from there and he goes down to the south, and he arrives in a city called Capernaum. And this is where we find this particular passage in verse 31, and we're going to read through verse 37. Jesus' encounter with this demon. "And he went down to Capernaum, a city of Galilee, and he was teaching them on the Sabbath, and they were astonished at his teaching, for his words possessed authority. And in the synagogue there was a man who had the spirit of an unclean demon, and he cried out with a loud voice, 'Ha! What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God.' But Jesus rebuked him, saying, 'Be silent and come out of him.' And when the demon had thrown him down in their midst, he came out of him, having done him no harm. And they were all amazed and said to one another, 'What is this word? For with authority and power he commands the unclean spirits, and they come out.' And reports about him went out into every place in the surrounding region." Fascinating, isn't it? Here is an encounter with the Son of God and a demon. And let's notice what the demon says about Jesus and how he responds to Jesus. Because ironically, guess where this demon is? If we could put it in USA 2022, the demon's in church. The demon is in the synagogue, right? And in the synagogue, he throws down this man, and Jesus rebukes him. But look at what he says here in verse 34. "What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." Isn't that fascinating? I am amazed thinking about here is this demon who wants nothing to do with Jesus, and yet the proclamation that this demon makes. We notice, first of all, the vehemence. Start with a V. the hatred, the animosity of this particular demon. Look at what he says. What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? You see, the demon understood. He understood the logic. God, Jesus here, the representation, the embodiment of God is holy. I am not. What is holy cannot be with that which is not holy. What have you to do with us? We might put it this way. God can't be near sin. God can't associate with sin. So here is this demon, and he is in possession of this man crying out, what have you to do with us? Because nothing that is unclean can have anything to do with that which is unclean. So this demon automatically knows, hey, something's up. Something's about to happen. Maybe Jesus is beginning his ministry. Have you, he continues, what have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? He understood, this demon understood. Now understand, we're not talking about a religious person. We're not talking about someone who cares about humanity in any way. We're not talking about someone who is a good, moral, upstanding citizen. We are talking about a demon. Have you come to destroy us? The demon understood the victory. He understood the animosity and the hatred, but he also understood the victory. That Jesus, in the end, Jesus is going to win. That the victory belongs to God, and that the battle is already over. And the demon understood that Jesus, if he wanted to, has the power to destroy him. Do we understand that? Do we understand the power? Do we understand that the battle's already over? Have you come to destroy us? He understood that the next step is his destruction. When he encounters Jesus, since good cannot overcome, or since evil can't overcome good, the next step is destruction. So his question to Jesus, what are you doing here? Have you come to destroy us? Have you come for our destruction? The demon understood that God has won. He didn't ask, Jesus, have you come to promote us? Jesus, have you come to shake our hands and to congratulate us? Have you come so that we can work together? As many of those Pharisees pointed out, he's casting out demons by Beelzebub. No. The demon understood that the victory was already God's. He understood that good cannot exist with evil, that sin cannot exist with righteousness. He understood that the victory is already won, the war is already over. We're just fighting a few measly little battles right now. He also understood, if you continue in verse 34, the validation of who Jesus is. I know who you are, the Holy One of God. Now, if you remember, it wasn't for a couple more years that Peter, remember in Matthew chapter 16, when Jesus asked them the question, who do people say that I am? And they begin to answer. You remember, some say Elijah, some say John, or the Baptist, or one of the prophets. Who do you say that I am? And Peter, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. That wasn't for a couple more years. And yet here is this demon saying, you are the Holy One of God. He understood, first of all, you are holy, I am not. He understood, you came from God, I work for the devil. You are the Holy One of God. That is to say that Jesus was here for a purpose. He had an express intent purpose. He was holy. He was, we might say, anointed. We might say in our common vernacular, he was the Christ, the anointed one. He came from God Almighty. I think it's fascinating to think about all the things just here in this short sentence, this short recorded for us conversation that the demon has with Jesus, all the things that he knew, and yet so many people in the world struggle with. They struggle with this idea that God is a good God, and that if you want to be with God, you cannot be bad. You cannot be unholy. You cannot be unclean. But the demon understood it. Even the demon understood something as common as that. And so many people question us today. If God is actually good, then fill in the blank. But the demon knew that he was the Holy One of God. He also understood that, and we've already talked about, that the war is already over. And yet so many people, as they're going through a strife, as they're going through a valley or the storm, they begin to wonder, where is God? Why is God not winning this war? Friends, the war is already over. The next step for this demon was destruction. It's just a matter of, can you win this battle that you're in? And that Jesus was who he claimed to be. Isn't that interesting? Given the context here in Luke chapter 4, isn't it interesting that the demon understood that Jesus was the Holy One of God, and yet he goes back to the people who saw him grow up and saw him, and they cared for him, and they loved him as a little child, and they grew up and became a great man. He goes back and tells them, I am the Holy One of God, and they say, no, you're not. We saw you when you were a child. We know who your daddy is. We know your brothers and your sisters. We know you. You can't be from God. And yet the demon knew. Isn't that fascinating? The next one. Turn a couple of pages. We're still in Luke. Luke chapter 8 here. This is perhaps the most famous one. This one's recorded for us in all the synoptic gospels. It's recorded in Matthew chapter 8 and in Mark chapter 5 and here in Luke chapter 8. Jesus, what a fascinating, in my opinion, a fascinating series of events over the past couple of days. If you remember, you go back to the beginning here in Luke chapter 8. Jesus is teaching and giving some of the most important and crucial to our understanding principles for Christianity. Then Jesus, he tells his disciples to go over to the other side of the lake after dismissing the crowd, the great multitude. And as they're going across the lake, you remember, there's a great storm. The storm comes up and these fishermen suppose that they are about to die. And then Jesus gets up. And he says, where is your faith? Rebuking the wind and the waves. And the disciples marvel. Who is this? The demons know. But they ask, who is this that even the winds and the waves obey him? So they arrive at the other side. And it seems as if they arrive at the other side for this express purpose, because after this, they go back to the other side. But as they arrive on this side, they encounter a man who had many demons. You remember this. This man was naked. And he was living in a not so great location. As a realtor say, location, location, location. He was with a bunch of dead people in the tombs. And it was so bad that there were guards who were watching over him. And it was so bad that the citizens of that particular town feared to go by that way, because often he would break those chains and run away. How would you feel if you were being chased by a naked, demon-possessed man? It's exactly what was happening here. Let's read this beginning of verse 26, and we'll read through verse 36. Then they sailed to the country of the Gerasenes, which is opposite Galilee. When Jesus had stepped out on the land, there met him a man from the city who had demons. For a long time he had worn no clothes, and he had not lived in a house but among the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell down before him and said with a loud voice, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torment me." For he had commanded the unclean spirit to come out of the man. For many a time it had seized him. He was kept under guard and bound with chains and shackles, but he would break the bonds and be driven by the demon into the desert. Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Legion," for many demons had entered him. And they begged him not to command him to depart into the abyss. Now a large herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside, and these demons, they begged him to let them enter these, so he gave them permission. Then the demons had come out of the man and entered the pigs, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and drowned. When the herdsmen saw what had happened, they fled and told the whole city and the country. Then people went out to see what had happened, and they came to Jesus and found the man whom the demons had gone, sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. And those who had seen it told them how the demon-possessed man had been healed. Another instance where people were marveling at Jesus. The word here, they were afraid. They were scared. This demon, if we take some lessons from this particular demon, he understood, if you'll allow me, the pomp of Jesus. He understood who Jesus was. He understood the circumstances. He understood the royalty that was in front of him. And even his disciples didn't understand. Who is this that even the demons or even the winds and the waves obey him? But this demon understood. Look at what he does. When he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell down before him and said with a loud voice. He ran. Mark chapter 5 tells us. He ran to Jesus. And when he gets to Jesus, what does he do? He falls down before him. What a lesson for all of us. He saw Jesus, and he understood who Jesus was. He understood his power, his place, but he understood who he was in the presence of. Which leads us to this next point. In verse 28, we continue. When he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell down before him and said with a loud voice, "What have you to do with me, Jesus," the position, "Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torment me." Son of the Most High God. He understood his position. You are the Son of the Most High God. Now, what does that mean? If the king sends his son to be in charge, what is the situation? The prince is the one who is running the show. Son of the Most High God has come down to earth, which he has created, and guess what? Who is in charge? The demon knew it. The disciples were beginning to process it. Who is this man? Which leads us to this other one. The pomp. The position of Jesus as Son of the Most High and the power of Jesus. What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I look at it in verse 28. I beg you, do not torment me. He understood that Jesus has the power to torment him. Jesus has that type of power. So he comes running up to Jesus, falling down before him and saying, "Jesus, I beg you." He understood that Jesus had the power, didn't he? The demons, I mean, we're not talking about some great Christian. We're talking about the worst of the worst that's ever existed on earth. The demon knows. I beg you, do not torment me. Then you continue reading and you get to verse 31. Look at what it says. And they begged him not to command them to depart into the abyss. They recognized that their state in existence, if we could call it a life, their state in existence was at the mercy of Jesus. Isn't there a lesson for us? They begged him a second time. Not only do not torment me, but don't throw me into this abyss. Throw me into those pigs instead. And then you continue looking and understanding the power of Jesus. When you understand this word at the end of verse 32, so he gave them permission. Permission. Your child comes up to you and they say, Daddy, can I have a popsicle? What does that mean? It must mean that supper's over. That means that you have the power, doesn't it? That means that the decision is yours. They are asking for your permission to have a popsicle. What does that mean? That means that they are dependent on you for this popsicle. So the very idea that the demon comes and he asks Jesus for permission to enter the pigs, doesn't that entail that they are dependent in some way on the power of Jesus? Doesn't that mean in some way that Jesus is in control of the situation? Doesn't that mean that Jesus has the authority? Now, we could get a lot deeper into the topic. But the long and the short of it is, there ain't no reason to be scared of demons. Because God is more powerful. Isn't there a lesson as we think about this particular encounter with these demons, Legion? As we think about the pomp of Jesus, you think about his position, we think about his power that he possessed. I mean, absolutely, you understand that at the feet of Jesus, at the name of Jesus, every knee is going to bow down in heaven, on earth. Every tongue is going to confess, right? I mean, isn't that what Philippians chapter 2 teaches us? That Jesus has that type of stateliness, that Jesus has that type of authority. How? Why? You continue in Philippians chapter 2, you're reminded because of God. Because he is who he claimed to be. And even the demons understood Jesus, Son of the Most High God. Even after Jesus completed his ministry, hanging on the cross. If you are the Christ, come down from the cross. If you are who you claim to be, who is it that hit you? Even the demons knew. I think I would probably be amiss if I didn't read and mention this particular verse in the book of James in chapter 2. In James chapter 2, this is what it says. You believe that God is one. You do well. Even the demons believe and shudder. I think in many instances, with many people, not necessarily with you. That the demons are more religious. That the demons have a better understanding of who Jesus is than many people in the world do. Isn't that sad? That the demons understand the power of God. That the demons understand who Jesus was and who he claimed to be. That the demons understood the existence of good and the existence of evil are absolutely incapable of coexistence. They understood that God is in control and that they are at their mercy. You know, in actuality, there's a lot you can learn from demons, isn't there? There's a lot to be said about them. I hope and I pray that your life is more faithful to God, more understanding than that of demons. But perhaps you're subject to the invitation, not because you don't believe. You're subject to the invitation because you want a greater belief, because you want to understand more, perhaps because you need forgiveness of something that you've done. If we can help you, or if you're subject in any way, please come as we stand.